The MIT acceptance letter lay yellowed in my desk drawer, not from regret, but as a reminder of the moment I chose authenticity over expectation. The full scholarship for biochemical engineering had been everything my parents dreamed of: prestigious, lucrative, and safe. Just like the path my sister Hannah had taken at Harvard Business School 3 years before me. "You're throwing your future away," my father had said that spring morning 5 years ago, his disappointment weighing heavy in our kitchen. "Agricultural science at the State University Abbey. You have a brilliant mind. Don't waste it playing in dirt." But standing now in the golden dawn light, watching Jackson adjust the irrigation timers we'd programmed together, I knew I'd chosen correctly. Our 60-acre farm hummed with purposeful activity, heritage tomatoes, climbing trellises we'd built by hand, rows of herbs supplying 5 high-end restaurants, and the greenhouse where we'd perfected mycorrhizal soil partnerships that doubled our yields. Jackson appeared beside me, soil under his fingernails, flannel shirt already damp with morning work. "The Riverside restaurant doubled their winter order, ma," he said, grinning. "And Peterson's wants to feature our microgreens on their spring menu." I smiled, calculating the numbers automatically. These weren't the figures that impressed at cocktail parties, but they represented something real livelihoods created, families fed, land healed rather than exploited. My phone buzzed. "Sunday dinner. Hannah has big news, Mom." Hannah always had big news. Last month it was their penthouse upgrade. Before that, Trevor's promotion to senior portfolio manager. Their life unfolded like a carefully curated social media feed, each achievement designed for maximum impact. "You're thinking about Sunday dinner," Jackson observed, smoothing the worry line between my eyebrows. "How can you tell? Same look you had when you were deciding about MIT." That decision had defined everything, while my classmates pursued corporate internships and networking events. I spent summers developing drought-resistant varieties and studying permaculture systems, while Hannah climbed social ladders at exclusive galas. I learned that true wealth came from creating value that nourished both people and planet. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like," I admitted. "Fluorescent lights instead of sunrises, climate-controlled labs instead of seasons." Jackson gestured toward our fields, where employees were beginning their morning routines. "Maria's putting her daughter through college with what we pay her. Sam bought his own truck. We're not just making money, we're making possibilities." That evening, as we reviewed harvest projections on our porch, I thought about paths not taken. MIT would have led to prestigious research, impressive salaries, the kind of success that looked good on paper. Instead, I had calloused hands, dirt under my fingernails, and a business that fed 300 families while healing 40 acres of farmland. My phone rang. Hannah's professional headshot filled the screen. Perfect makeup. Practiced smile. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice strained despite the cheerful words. "You're still coming Sunday, right?" "Of course. Jackson and I wouldn't miss it." "Good. I need—" She paused, and in that silence I heard something I'd never heard from my confident older sister: uncertainty. "We need to talk. All of us. Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," she said quickly. "Trevor just closed his biggest deal ever. We're celebrating." But beneath her bright tone, I caught something that reminded me of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. My sister, who never showed weakness, sounded afraid. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was theater, and Hannah was perpetually the star. She arrived 20 minutes late in Trevor's Tesla, designer heels announcing her entrance like a drum roll. Sorry, she called, air-kissing our mother's cheek. "Trevor had a call with Singapore. You know how global markets are." Trevor followed, adjusting his Rolex with practiced casualness. "Mr. Morrison," he said, gripping my father's hand. brought that Macallan 25 I mentioned. Dad's eyes lit up. Trevor understood his audience perfectly expensive whiskey for father, imported orchids for mother, just enough financial jargon to remind everyone of his success. Still farming, I see, Trevor said to Jackson, his tone suggesting farming was a gap year that had lasted too long. Still feeding people, Jackson replied mildly. How's the financial sector? Can't complain, just restructured a portfolio worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Trevor's smile was sharp. Agricultural futures are particularly volatile right now, interesting opportunities for those who understand leverage. I watched Hannah during this exchange. She stood slightly behind Trevor, her smile perfect, but her hands restless adjusting her necklace, smoothing her dress, checking her phone. The nervous energy was unlike her usual composure. At dinner, Trevor held court about market volatility while my father hung on every word. Hannah shared updates about charity galas and wine country weekends. My mother made admiring sounds at appropriate moments. "What about you two?" Dad asked eventually, his attention turning to us with polite obligation. "How's the farming going?" "Really well," I said. "We signed 3 new restaurant contracts, and our CSA program has a 40-family waiting list." "CSA?" Trevor asked. "Community-supported agriculture," Jackson explained. "Families buy shares of our harvest, they get fresh produce weekly, we get guaranteed income and community investment." "Interesting model," Trevor said dismissively. "What kind of returns are we talking about? It's not just about returns." "That reminds me," Hannah interrupted brightly. "We have news." The table fell silent, spotlight shifting to her. "Trevor's been offered senior vice president at Meridian Capital," she announced. "Significant equity package, corner office, the works." "Congratulations," Mom gushed. "How wonderful." But I watched Trevor's face and saw something flicker. Not pride, but panic, quickly masked. "Still working through details," he said carefully. "Legal reviews, contract negotiations." "Details." Hannah's voice rose slightly. "You said it was finalized." "These things take time. Babe, lawyers, you know." An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Hannah's composure cracked momentarily, revealing raw anxiety underneath. Later, as they prepared to leave, Hannah hugged me tighter than usual. "Are you happy?" she whispered urgently. The question startled me. "What do you mean, really happy? Not just content or satisfied, but genuinely happy?" I studied her face, searching for the meaning behind her question. "Yes, I am. Why? I don't understand how that's possible," she said, studying my expression as if looking for lies. "Your life is so small, so limited. Don't you want more?" Before I could answer, Trevor appeared. "Ready. Babe, early morning tomorrow." As they drove away, Jackson slipped his arm around my waist. "She's not okay." "What makes you say that? Happy people don't ask others if they're happy. They only ask that question when they're questioning their own." That night, I thought about Hannah's question. My life was bounded by seasons and soil conditions, by plant needs and weather patterns. But within those boundaries, I'd found something vast purpose, community, the satisfaction of creating value that mattered. Hannah's world looked unlimited from the outside, but I wondered if it felt as confining as a gilded cage. The drought that summer tested every farmer in our region, but it revealed the wisdom of Jackson's sustainable practices. While conventional operations watched crops wither despite expensive irrigation, our soil, rich with organic matter and fungal networks, retained moisture and supported healthy growth. "Look at this," Jackson said one July morning, kneeling beside a thriving tomato plant. The earth around it was dark and spongy despite weeks without rain. 5 years of composting and cover crops. The soil remembers how to take care of itself. Our neighbors weren't so fortunate. Drive any rural road and you'd see browning fields, desperate farmers running irrigation they couldn't afford. But our harvest continued, our CSA boxes overflowing with vibrant vegetables that commanded premium prices. During this time, Hannah's calls became frequent and strange, brief conversations, usually late at night, always with flimsy pretexts she'd seen an article about farming or wanted our opinion on a restaurant. But I sensed deeper need in these calls, a reaching out she couldn't articulate. "How do you do it?" she asked one night after 11. Music and voices echoed in the background. "Do what?" "Sleep soundly, not worry constantly about the future." I sat up, suddenly alert. "Hannah, where are you?" "Some charity thing, cancer research. Maybe children's literacy, they blur together." Her words slurred slightly. "Trevor's networking, always networking." "Are you drinking?" "Just wine. Expensive wine. Very expensive wine." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what Trevor made last year? His bonus alone exceeded most people's entire salaries. Money isn't everything." "Easy for you to say. You chose poverty." "I chose purpose." "Same thing. Isn't it?" But conviction was absent from her voice. "Abby, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever feel like you're performing? Like your whole life is a show for other people?" Through the phone, I heard Trevor calling her name, his voice sharp. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Trevor's looking for me." The calls continued, Hannah reaching out at odd hours with trivial questions that could have waited. I began understanding she wasn't calling for information, but for connection, for some anchor to something real in a life that felt increasingly artificial. Meanwhile, our farm thrived. The local paper featured our water conservation methods. The agricultural extension brought visiting farmers to study our techniques. We hired 2 more employees and expanded our greenhouse operation. "You're building something important," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, studying our soil management. "This isn't just farming, it's regenerative agriculture. You're healing land while feeding people." The final call came at dawn, just as I headed to check seedlings. Hannah's voice was raw, exhausted. "Abby, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "Trevor's in trouble, real trouble. And I think we might be too." Before I could respond, Trevor's voice cut through the background, sharp and angry. "Who are you talking to? Hang up. Now!" The line went dead. I tried calling back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. For the rest of that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that my perfect sister was drowning. Even while maintaining her flawless facade for the world, the truth emerged 3 weeks later through bank records, not Hannah's confession. Reviewing our farm's finances, I noticed irregular deposits over 2 years, 500 here, 1,000 there, from an account I didn't recognize. "Where's this money coming from?" Jackson asked, leaning over my shoulder. 20 minutes with customer service gave me the answer, H. Morrison, Hannah, using her maiden name. That evening, I drove to the city to confront her. Their building was glass and steel, doormen in white gloves, elevators requiring key cards. Hannah answered in yoga clothes, makeup free, looking vulnerable and young. "Abby, what are you doing here? We need to talk about the money." Her face went pale. She glanced back into the apartment, then stepped into the hallway. "Trevor's at the office. Again." She sat heavily on a hallway bench. "Why have you been secretly supporting our farm?" "Because I was jealous," she whispered. "Because every time I saw you and Jackson, I realized what I was missing." "What do you mean? You chose something real, Abby." "Something meaningful. I chose this." She gestured toward her apartment door. "A life that looks perfect, but feels empty." I sat beside her, processing this revelation. "How long have you felt this way?" "Years. Maybe always." Tears started flowing. "Remember when we were kids and I had to win everything, grades, competitions, Mom and Dad's attention?" I nodded. I thought if I achieved enough, accumulated enough, I'd finally feel worthy of love, of respect, of existing. She wiped her eyes. But the more I achieved, the emptier I felt. Then I'd see you and Jackson building something together, looking genuinely content, and it made me furious. Why didn't you tell me? How could I spent years mocking your choices, calling your life insignificant. How could I admit I envied everything about it? Hannah was quiet for a moment, then spoke barely audibly. There's something else. About Mom and Dad. What about them? They went bankrupt when I was 10. Lost their business, almost lost the house. They never told you because you were too young, and by the time you could understand, they'd rebuilt. Hannah's eyes were haunted. That's why they're obsessed with financial success. They're terrified of losing everything again. The revelation hit me physically. Suddenly, my parents' behavior made sense, their money worries, emphasis on stable careers, disappointment in my unconventional path. They made me promise never to tell you, wanted to protect you from their fear. Hannah's voice cracked. But that fear shaped everything my need to achieve, their approval of Trevor's success, their dismissal of your farming. I took her hand. Hannah, what's happening with Trevor? She was quiet so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she looked up with pain-filled eyes. He's been lying. To me. To everyone. That promotion he announced, it fell through months ago. His investment strategies built on borrowed money, leveraged positions that could destroy us if markets turn. She took a shaky breath. We're not wealthy, Abby. We're drowning in debt, gambling with money we don't have. Before I could respond, the apartment door opened. Trevor appeared, disheveled despite his expensive suit. Hannah, what's going on? Recognition dawned in his eyes. She told you. Trevor, Hannah said softly, we can't keep pretending. We're not pretending anything. He snapped. Rough patch, that's all. Meridian's still possible, plus 3 other prospects. But I saw desperation in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. This man who'd always exuded confidence looked barely held together. Trevor, I said gently, maybe it's time to consider alternatives. He laughed bitterly. Like what becoming farmers? There are worse things. Easy for you to say. You never had anything to lose. The words stung, but I saw the pain behind them. Trevor wasn't attacking. He was defending against terror of failure. That night, driving home, I thought about secrets that had shaped my family for decades. Parents' hidden bankruptcy, Hannah's silent envy, Trevor's desperate charade, all of us performing different versions of success while running from our deepest fears. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in September. Hannah's voice was barely coherent through sobs. Abby, I need you. Please. Everything's falling apart. I found her on the steps outside their building, still in evening dress from some charity event, shivering in the pre-dawn cold. Makeup streaked down her cheeks. Hannah, what happened? Trevor's gone. Packed a bag and left. Said he couldn't handle the pressure. I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders. Tell me what happened. The story emerged in broken pieces. Trevor had been part of an investment scheme promising enormous returns too good to be true. He'd convinced clients to invest, mortgaged their penthouse without telling Hannah, used their savings as collateral for increasingly risky positions. The FBI came to his office yesterday, she whispered, investigating the fund for securities fraud. Trevor wasn't running it, but he was their biggest promoter. He could face criminal charges. Oh, Hannah. That's not the worst part. She looked at me with hollow eyes. He mortgaged our home 3 months ago, used everything we owned as collateral for one last sure thing. We have 2 weeks before foreclosure. I felt sick. How much do you owe? $2.4 million. The number hung like a death sentence. Cars? Furniture? Jewelry? None of it's really ours. It's all collateral. What did Trevor say before he left? Hannah's face crumpled. He blamed me, said I created pressure with my expectations, my lifestyle demands, said if I'd been content with less, he wouldn't have taken such risks. She wiped her eyes. Maybe he's right. He's not right, I said firmly. He made these choices. You didn't force him to gamble with your future. We sat in silence as the city awakened. Early commuters hurried past, heading to jobs they thought were secure, lives they believed stable. I wondered how many were one bad decision away from sitting on former home steps. What am I going to do? Hannah asked. I have nowhere to go. Joint accounts are frozen pending investigation. I have maybe $300 in personal checking. You'll come home with me. Home. To the farm, guest cottage until you figure things out. Hannah stared. You'd do that, after everything I've said about your life. You're my sister. She started crying again, but this time relief mixed with disbelief. I don't know anything about farming. You know, marketing and business management. We need help with online presence, customer relationships. I stood and offered my hand. It won't be the life you're used to, but it's honest work. Honest work, she repeated, testing the words. I don't remember the last time I could say that. That afternoon, we packed her belongings from the penthouse. The opulent space felt like a museum, beautiful objects without meaning, expensive furniture never truly comfortable. Hannah moved mechanically, filling boxes with the few items actually hers. I kept thinking this would feel like home eventually, she said in the master bedroom larger than our entire kitchen. Thought if I accumulated enough beautiful things, I'd feel beautiful. Surrounded myself with luxury to feel valuable. And now I realize I was just a tourist in my own life. Loading her car, I thought about my conversation with our parents the night before. They were devastated, but also relieved their own finances weren't affected. Dad immediately discussed lawyers and damage control while Mom worried about appearances. What will we tell people? She'd asked. The country club, our friends. We'll tell them the truth. Hannah's going through difficulties and we're supporting her. But what will they think about Trevor? Our family. I'd wanted to shake her, make her understand that appearances mattered far less than caring for each other. But I understood their experience with financial ruin had equated security with respectability. Driving toward the farm that evening, Hannah stared out at landscape transforming from suburban developments to farmland, streetlights replaced by stars. I haven't been on this road in years, she said quietly. I forgot how dark it gets. Wait until you see sunrise. It's different than in the city, bigger somehow. She was quiet. Then, Abby, why are you helping me? Really? I thought carefully. Because you're not the person who mocked my choices. That was armor you wore. And because I think you've been looking for home your whole life. Maybe it's time you found it. When we pulled into our driveway, Jackson waited on the porch. He helped carry boxes into the guest cottage, asking no questions, offering no judgments, setting up her temporary home. I felt something shifting in our family dynamic. For the first time in years, we were caring for each other instead of competing. The family meeting my father called felt like a tribunal. My parents' living room was thick with tension and unspoken recriminations. Hannah sat rigidly on the sofa edge while Jackson and I took chairs across from our parents. Trevor's usual spot stood conspicuously empty. Thank you for coming, Dad began formally, as if this were a board meeting rather than family crisis. As you know, Hannah faces significant financial challenges. Your mother and I have consulted our financial advisor and attorney to understand options. Mom twisted her wedding ring nervously. We want to help, of course, but our retirement savings can only stretch so far. How much can you contribute? Hannah asked quietly. $50,000, Dad replied, substantial portion of our liquid assets, but manageable without jeopardizing our security. The number hung heavy. $50,000 was more than Jackson and I saw most years, but against Hannah's debt, barely a gesture. It's a start, Hannah said without conviction. Dad cleared his throat. Which brings us to why we asked you both here. Your farm has become quite valuable. I felt Jackson tense. What do you mean? The south parcel, 20 acres you purchased last year. Agricultural land here is appreciating rapidly. If you sold that section, it could provide significant assistance. The words hit like a physical blow. Sell our land. Just the south parcel, Mom added quickly. You'd still have 40 acres. Plenty for your operation. Our operation employs 6 people and feeds 300 families, Jackson said, voice carefully controlled. The south parcel isn't just land. It's integral to our water management and crop rotation. Dad frowned. Surely there are conventional alternatives to these holistic methods. Yes, I said, standing abruptly. We could switch to chemical fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, municipal irrigation. Costs would triple. Organic certification lost. We'd become just another struggling conventional farm. But you'd be helping your sister, Mom said, as if that ended discussion. Would I be? I turned to Hannah. What would you do with the money? Hannah stared at her hands. Pay down debt. Try negotiating with creditors. Maybe Trevor would return if we had a plan. Do you want Trevor to return? The question surprised her. I don't know. This is my marriage. This is your life, I corrected. You're asking us to destroy ours to subsidize a lifestyle that made you miserable. Abby, Dad said sternly. That's not fair. Isn't it? Years of dismissal finally found voice. This family has treated our farm like a hobby. You've mocked our choices, minimized our success, acted like our life was somehow less valuable because it didn't match your expectations. That's not true, Mom protested. Really, when did you last ask about our business, celebrate our achievements, show interest in what we've built? I looked around the room. Hannah needed help, so you immediately thought of our land as something to liquidate, not as our livelihood or home, but as an asset for conversion to cash. Jackson stood beside me. May I speak frankly? Dad nodded, looking relieved at Jackson's calmer tone. The south parcel contains our primary water retention system, Jackson explained. Pollinator habitats supporting fruit production. Erosion prevention for our entire property. Selling wouldn't just reduce acreage, it would fundamentally compromise everything we've built. How much? Dad asked. Potential sale price, around $300,000, I admitted. But that's not the point. $300,000 could solve Hannah's immediate problems. Mom said. No, it couldn't, Jackson replied quietly. It would delay them. Hannah's debt exceeds that, and giving money without addressing underlying issues won't fix anything. What underlying issues? Dad demanded. I looked at Hannah, who'd remained silent. Tell them what you told me about how you've been feeling. She shook her head. They wouldn't understand. Try us, Mom said gently. Hannah took a shaky breath. I've been miserable for years, performing happiness, chasing meaningless status symbols, living a life that felt empty. Trevor's ruin was devastating, but also relief. It meant I could stop pretending. My parents exchanged glances. Honey, you don't mean that, Mom said. You were so successful. I was successful at appearing successful. Hannah interrupted. There's a difference. Uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Dad spoke. "What are you proposing instead?" I took a deep breath. "Hannah stays in our guest cottage as long as needed. We're hiring farm store management, online marketing, customer relations. She has skills that could benefit our business." "Working on a farm," Mom's voice was faint. "Working with a farm," Jackson corrected. "Using her background to help grow a sustainable enterprise. And her debts, bankruptcy," I said. "Start over with a clean slate. Not pleasant, but honest. What will people think?" Mom looked horrified. "Maybe," Hannah said quietly. "It's time I stopped caring what people think." The disease appeared overnight in late October, just as we prepared for our biggest harvest ever. Jackson found it first brown, wilted leaves on our prize heirloom tomatoes. The plants supplying our most exclusive restaurant clients and forming the cornerstone of our fall marketing campaign. "This isn't right," he said, kneeling beside affected plants, voice carrying tension I'd rarely heard. "This isn't any blight I've seen." Within 48 hours, infections spread to 3 additional crop sections. Symptoms were devastating rapid leaf decay, stem rot, complete plant collapse. Worse was the pattern disease seemed to target our most valuable crops, while leaving common varieties relatively untouched. Dr. Rodriguez arrived from the agricultural extension with plant pathologists. They took samples, conducted tests, delivered the worst possible news. "Modified strain of late blight," she told us gravely. "Genetically altered to resist standard organic treatments. This isn't natural evolution. Someone engineered this." "Engineered?" Hannah looked confused. "Why would someone create crop disease? Bioterrorism," Dr. Rodriguez said bluntly. "Though likely agricultural sabotage. Someone wanted to target your specific operation." And the implications hit like physical blows. "You're saying someone deliberately infected our farm? This pathogen was designed to exploit your exact growing conditions, organic soil amendments, specific companion plantings, even irrigation timing created by someone understanding your methods intimately." Jackson's face had gone pale. "How much crop loss are we looking at?" "If we can't contain it within a week, probably 80% of fall harvest, could remain in soil for years, making replanting extremely difficult." That evening, surrounded by pathology reports and insurance documents, the crisis scope became clear. We stood to lose not just this season's income, but potentially the entire farm. "Insurance might cover some crop loss," I said, reading our policy, "but not if determined to be intentional sabotage." "Even if they pay," Jackson added, "won't cover long-term soil remediation or lost customer contracts." And Hannah had been unusually quiet during these discussions. She'd thrown herself into learning our business over recent months, and I could see her calculating financial implications. "How much debt would this create?" she asked finally. "Enough to lose the farm." Jackson admitted. "We'd have to sell to cover loans." "No." Hannah's voice was sharp. "Not after everything you've built." "Sometimes things don't work out," I said. The words felt like ash. "This isn't about chance." Hannah interrupted. "Someone did this to you. Someone who knew exactly how to destroy what you've created." Over following days, as we desperately tried containing the outbreak, I noticed Hannah spending long hours on phone and computer. When I asked what she was working on, she was evasive. "Researching treatment options," she said. "There might be something pathologists missed." But her behavior was increasingly strange, agitated, distracted, often stepping outside for calls she ended abruptly when anyone approached. Crisis deepened when our bank called. Word of crop failure had reached them, and they wanted to discuss loan obligations. "We understand this is difficult," the loan officer said during a tense conference room meeting. "But your business model depends on consistent harvest income. Without this season's revenue—" "We understand the implications," Jackson said quietly. "We'll need a recovery plan within 30 days, or we'll initiate foreclosure proceedings. Driving home from that meeting, I felt impending loss settle like physical weight. Everything we'd built, everything we'd dreamed, could disappear within months. There has to be something, Hannah said from the passenger seat. Some way to fight this. We are fighting. Pathologists working around the clock, trying every treatment protocol. Fight whoever did this. I looked at her sharply. Do you know something? She was quiet for a long moment. Promise you'll hear me out before getting angry. Chill ran down my spine. Hannah, what did you do? I didn't do anything. But I think Trevor might have. The words hung like accusations. That's impossible. Trevor doesn't know agriculture. No, but he knows people who do, and he's desperate enough for anything. Hannah's voice was barely audible. He called last week, said he had a plan to help all of us, a way to restructure our family's assets to everyone's benefit. You think Trevor sabotaged our farm? I think Trevor hired someone to sabotage your farm so you'd be forced to sell, then planned to swoop in as buyer. Hannah's hands shook. He's done things like this before, manipulated situations to create investment opportunities. I pulled over, mind reeling. If that's true, then we need to prove it, Hannah said firmly, and we need to stop him. That night, as Jackson slept fitfully, I stared at the ceiling thinking about infection patterns, Trevor's disappearance timing, and Hannah's growing suspicions. If Trevor was responsible, our crisis wasn't just bad luck, it was deliberate attack on everything we'd worked for. But it also meant there might be a way to fight back. Trevor's return was as dramatic as his departure. He arrived Wednesday morning in a rented SUV, expensive suit, managing to look both confident and desperate. Hannah saw him first from the farm store window and came running. "He's here," she said breathlessly. "Trevor's here, and he's not alone." Through glass walls, I could see two other men in suits beside the vehicle, looking completely out of place among our winter vegetables. Trevor walked toward the farmhouse with purposeful stride of someone on a mission. Jackson appeared at my shoulder. "Should we call police?" "Let's hear what he has to say first, but stay close." "Mom, we met Trevor on the front porch, up close. He looked haggard despite expensive clothes thinner than I remembered. Dark circles under his eyes, nervous energy that made my skin crawl. Abby, Jackson," he said with forced cheerfulness. "Hope you don't mind the intrusion. Brought associates very interested in your situation." "Our situation." Jackson's voice was carefully neutral. "The crop failure, tragic, really, but sometimes setbacks create opportunities." Trevor gestured toward his companions. "I've been working with investors who specialize in agricultural distress sales. They're prepared to make an offer solving all your problems." "What kind of offer?" I asked, though I suspected where this headed. One suited man approached, carrying leather briefcase. "Ms. Morrison, I'm David Chen from Meridian Agricultural Holdings. We've reviewed your property and understand you're facing significant challenges due to recent crop losses." "We're managing," Jackson said firmly. "Of course," Chen continued smoothly. "But reality is this disease type can persist in soil for years. Even if you secure financing for remediation, there's no guarantee of successful future harvests." Trevor jumped in eagerly. "That's why this offer is so generous. Fair market value despite contamination issues. You could walk away debt-free and have capital to start over elsewhere. Start over doing what I asked. Whatever you want," Trevor said, spreading his arms. "You're both intelligent, educated. This farming experiment was admirable, but sometimes you must know when to cut losses." Hannah had been silent, but I could see tension building. What would they do with the land? Chen opened his briefcase, pulled out glossy brochure. "Meridian specializes in converting agricultural properties into luxury developments. This area is perfectly positioned for high-end rural estates, gentlemen's farms for weekend retreats." "Gentlemen's farms," Jackson repeated flatly. "Exactly. Properties maintaining agricultural aesthetic without messy farming realities." Chen's smile was practiced and empty. Much more profitable than vegetables. I felt sick. You want to turn our farm into McMansions for rich people to play farmer on weekends? I want to turn your debt into freedom. Trevor interjected. This is a lifeline. Abby, take it. And if we refuse, Trevor's mask slipped. Then you'll lose everything anyway, just more slowly and painfully. Bank will foreclose. You'll face bankruptcy. Get a fraction of what we're offering. Hannah stepped forward, voice deadly quiet. How do you know so much about our crop disease? Trevor. What do you mean? You've been gone for months. How do you know details of what happened? Soil contamination and treatment challenges. Trevor's jaw tightened. Hannah, don't. Unless you've been monitoring the situation, unless you knew exactly when to show up with your convenient solution. Bam. Chen looked between them, sensing tension. Perhaps we should give you time to consider. No, Hannah said sharply. I think they should know exactly what kind of offer this is. She pulled out her phone and played a recording. Trevor's voice filled the air. Tinny, but unmistakable. The pathogen should activate within 72 hours of application. Target heirloom varieties. First, they'll create most dramatic visual impact. Make sure it looks like natural disease progression, not sabotage. Blood drained from Trevor's face. Hannah, what have you done? What I should have done months ago. Stopped letting you destroy everything decent in my life. Chen and his partner were already backing toward their car. Mr. Blake, you didn't mention this was a family dispute. Meridian doesn't involve itself in domestic situations. Wait, Trevor called desperately. The deal is still valid, but the men were driving away, leaving Trevor standing alone in our driveway. You recorded our conversations, Trevor asked Hannah, his voice hollow. I recorded the conversation where you confessed to hiring someone to infect their crops, she replied coldly. I've also forwarded that recording to the FBI, Agricultural Extension Office, and local district attorney. Trevor's composure finally cracked completely. You destroyed everything. That deal was our only chance to recover, to rebuild. To rebuild what? Hannah's voice rose. Another house of cards. Another performance built on lies and manipulation. I did this for us, Trevor shouted. For our marriage, our future. You did this because you can't accept failure, she shot back. Because you'd rather destroy something beautiful than admit you were wrong. Trevor looked between Hannah and me, his face cycling through anger, desperation, and finally defeat. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the expectations, the debts. I understand perfectly, Hannah said quietly. I lived with that pressure for years, but I learned something you never could. Sometimes the only way forward is letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be. Trevor stared at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Then he turned and walked back to his car without another word. As he drove away, Hannah sank onto the porch steps, hands shaking. Are you okay? I asked, sitting beside her. I think so. I think for the first time in years, I'm actually okay. Jackson sat on her other side. How long have you suspected? Since the disease first appeared, the targeting was too specific, too convenient. When he called last week, talking about restructuring assets and creating opportunities. She shrugged. I've heard him use those phrases before when manipulating business situations. So you've been investigating this whole time, recording him, tracking his associates, building a case. Hannah looked at me with tired eyes. I couldn't let him destroy what you'd built here. Not after you saved me. That evening, Dr. Rodriguez called with news about treatment options now that we knew the contamination was intentional. Good news is, engineered pathogens are often less stable than natural ones. She explained. We should be able to neutralize this within weeks rather than years. And our crops. You'll lose this season's harvest, but with proper remediation, you should be able to replant in spring with minimal risk. It wasn't perfect, but it was hope. Combined with Hannah's evidence against Trevor, we might even have grounds for lawsuit to recover our losses. The full scope of Trevor's scheme unraveled over following days like a badly knitted sweater. Hannah's recordings, combined with FBI investigation into Trevor's other activities, revealed a pattern of manipulation extending far beyond our farm. Agent Sarah Kim from the Bureau's White-Collar Crime Division sat in our kitchen, laptop open to files painting a disturbing picture. Trevor Blake has been running sophisticated real estate manipulation schemes for at least 3 years, she explained. He identifies properties with high development potential, creates artificial crises to force sales, then facilitates purchases by investor partners at below-market prices. "How many properties?" Jackson asked. 14 we can prove, mostly small businesses and family farms in areas ripe for development. Agent Kim turned her screen toward us. Restaurants facing mysterious health code violations right before real estate developers make offers. Family farms hit by natural disasters that turn out to be anything but natural. I felt sick. How many families lost their homes? All of them. The Kowalski Dairy in Pennsylvania, Martinez Vineyard in California, Chen Family Restaurant in Oregon, all forced into bankruptcy sales, then demolished for strip malls or luxury housing. Hannah, silent throughout this briefing, finally spoke. I helped him celebrate some of those deals. He told me they were legitimate investment opportunities, distressed properties he was helping redevelop. You couldn't have known, Agent Kim said gently. He compartmentalized activities carefully. Even business partners didn't understand the full scope. But Hannah shook her head. I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why his returns were so consistent, why he always seemed to know when properties would become available. The important thing is you came forward when you realized the truth, the agent replied. Your testimony and recordings will be crucial in prosecuting not just Trevor, but his entire network. And as we sat on the porch that night, watching stars appear over our damaged but not destroyed fields, Hannah spoke quietly. I keep thinking about the person I was when I was married to him, how I let his fear and ambition become mine. You're not that person anymore, I said. No, she agreed. I'm not sure who I am yet, but I know who I'm not. The crowdfunding campaign Hannah launched exceeded every expectation within 48 hours. Save Harvest Home Farm had raised $30,000 from over 500 donors. By week's end, the total climbed to nearly $80,000. Look at this, Hannah said, scrolling through comments on her laptop. Someone in Oregon donated $50 because they read about our sustainable practices in a magazine. A Vermont family sent $25 with a note saying they're starting their own farm and want to support others doing the same work. I leaned over her shoulder to read messages flooding in. Story after story of people who understood what we were trying to build, who saw our crisis as an attack on something valuable, needing protection. This is incredible, Jackson said, reviewing the donor list. Half these people have never visited our farm. But they understand what it represents, Hannah replied. Community-supported agriculture, sustainable practices, local food systems. You're not just growing vegetables, you're proving another way of doing business is possible. The campaign had been entirely Hannah's idea. While Jackson and I focused on crop remediation and legal proceedings, she'd thrown herself into telling our story to the world. Her marketing background, combined with genuine conversion to our mission, created compelling narrative that resonated far beyond our local community. We should do a video update, she suggested. Show people the progress we're making on soil treatment and replanting preparations. I hate being on camera, I protested. You don't have to say much. Just walk through the fields and explain what you're doing. People want to see their money making real difference. That afternoon, Hannah set up her phone to record, while Jackson and I demonstrated soil remediation. What started as awkward explanation gradually became natural conversation about mycorrhizal networks, companion planting, and long-term vision for regenerative agriculture. "This is perfect," Hannah said, reviewing footage. "You can see the passion in your faces when you talk about the work. This is why people are donating. They want to be part of something meaningful." The video went viral within days, shared across farming forums, environmental groups, and community gardening networks. Local TV stations picked up the story, framing it as a battle between corporate greed and family farming values. "We've been invited to speak at the State Agricultural Conference," I told Hannah one morning, reading through emails. "You should do it." "We should do it. This is as much your story as ours now." Hannah looked up from marketing materials she was designing for our spring CSA launch. "I'm not ready for that level of public speaking, but maybe someday." The transformation in my sister over recent months had been remarkable. The woman who once needed designer clothes and luxury accessories to feel valuable now found confidence in dirt-stained work boots and satisfaction of days spent solving practical problems. "I've been thinking about expanding our educational programs," she said one evening as we reviewed financial projections. "The crowdfunding success showed there's huge interest in what we're doing. What if we offered weekend workshops on sustainable farming techniques, like agritourism, like agriculture education, hands-on learning for people wanting to start small farms or improve backyard gardens?" Her enthusiasm was infectious. "Sessions on composting, seed saving, natural pest management, generate additional revenue while spreading sustainable practices," Jackson nodded slowly, "would require infrastructure investment, workshop spaces, demonstration areas, which we can afford now, thanks to crowdfunding and insurance settlement from Trevor's sabotage case." Hannah pulled up architectural sketches. "I've been working with a local designer who specializes in sustainable building. We could construct educational facilities demonstrating the same principles we use in farming." Looking at her detailed plans, I realized Hannah hadn't just found a job or temporary refuge. She'd discovered her calling. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came renewal extending far beyond changing seasons. Soil tests from our remediated fields showed not just absence of Trevor's engineered pathogen, but actually improved conditions from organic treatments we'd used to heal the damage. "It's like the land recovered stronger than before," Rodriguez explained during her final site visit. "The mycorrhizal networks you've cultivated helped break down the pathogen while enriching soil composition. Your fields are actually more productive now than before the sabotage." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Trevor's attempt to destroy our farm had ultimately strengthened it, while his own life lay in ruins, awaiting trial for fraud and agricultural terrorism. Our spring planting became a community event. The crowdfunding campaign had created a network of supporters wanting involvement in our recovery, and Hannah had organized volunteer days for people to participate in renewal. "This is incredible," I said, watching dozens of families plant seedlings in rows that had been barren months earlier. Children ran between furrows while parents learned about companion planting from Jackson. Hannah moved through groups with clipboards and enthusiasm, coordinating activities with efficiency of the business executive she'd once been, but with genuine warmth that had been absent from her corporate persona. "We've got 8 families signed up for intensive summer farming workshops," she reported, joining Jackson and me for a water break. "And weekend educational programs are booked through October." "How are you managing all of this?" I asked, amazed by her organizational capabilities. "It doesn't feel like work when you love what you're doing," she replied, then paused. "Actually, that's not true. It is hard work, but it's meaningful work, and that makes all the difference." The partnership agreement we'd signed the previous month had formalized what was already clear: Hannah had become integral to our operation. Her marketing expertise had expanded our customer base significantly, while educational initiatives were creating new revenue streams and spreading sustainable farming knowledge throughout the region. That evening, our parents came for dinner, a weekly tradition that had developed since Hannah's transformation. The change in their attitude toward our work had been gradual but unmistakable. My father now asked detailed questions about our business operations, while my mother had become genuinely interested in our sustainable practices. "Your sister tells us you're considering expanding to a second location," my father said over dessert. "Very preliminary discussions," I cautioned. "There's a 40-acre property about 10 miles north that's been farmed conventionally for decades. The owners want to retire and are interested in selling to someone who would convert it to organic production." "Would Hannah manage the second farm?" my mother asked. "My mother." "We'd all be involved," Hannah replied. "But yes, I'd probably take primary responsibility for the new location while continuing to manage our educational programs here." I watched my parents process this information. A year ago, they would have been horrified by Hannah's career trajectory. Now they looked proud of her accomplishments and excited about her future plans. "You know," my father said thoughtfully, "when I was your age, I thought success meant accumulating as much as possible, as quickly as possible. It took me years to understand that real success is building something that lasts." "What changed your mind?" Hannah asked. "Watching you two these past months, seeing how you've created something that supports not just yourselves, but your employees, your customers, your community." He looked around our simple kitchen with its view of the fields. "This is what success actually looks like." After they left, Hannah helped me clean up while Jackson reviewed the next day's harvest schedule. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked as we washed dishes. "The excitement of the city, financial rewards, social status?" Hannah considered seriously. "I miss the certainty I thought I had back then, the belief that I knew exactly what I wanted and how to get it." She dried a plate and put it away in our wooden cabinet. But that certainty was an illusion. I was constantly anxious, always performing, never quite feeling like I deserved what I had. And now I go to sleep tired from real work and wake up excited about real challenges. I know my labor creates something valuable, and I know I've earned my place in this community," she smiled. "It's a different kind of security, but it's actually secure." 1 year after Trevor's arrest, we hosted our first annual Harvest Festival. What had begun as a simple farm celebration had grown into a regional event, drawing over 1,000 visitors to celebrate sustainable agriculture and community resilience. The festival showcased everything we'd built together. Hannah's educational workshops drew families eager to learn about composting and garden planning. Jackson's demonstrations of heritage seed preservation attracted serious farmers from across the state. And our farm-to-table dinner featuring ingredients grown exclusively on our land sold out within hours. "I can't believe this is the same place facing bankruptcy 18 months ago," said Mayor Patricia Williams as she cut the ribbon for our new educational center. The building, constructed with reclaimed materials and powered by solar panels, embodied the same principles we applied to farming: sustainable, functional, and beautiful. Hannah stood beside me as local media documented the festivities. She wore work boots and a sundress she'd bought at a thrift store, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The designer clothes and professional makeup were long gone, replaced by confidence that came from meaningful work and genuine community connections. "How does it feel to see all this?" a reporter asked her. "Like coming home," Hannah replied simply. "I spent years chasing a version of success that was actually quite hollow. This," she gestured toward families learning about sustainable farming, children running through our pumpkin patch, local musicians performing on a stage built from hay bales. "This is what success actually looks like." The reporter turned to me. "Your farm has become a symbol of resilience and community support. What's next for Harvest Home Farm?" "We're expanding our educational programs and planning to open a second location next spring," I said. But our core mission remains the same, proving that sustainable agriculture isn't just environmentally responsible, it's economically viable and socially beneficial. As the day wound down and the last visitors headed home, Hannah, Jackson, and I sat on the porch where this story had begun. The fields around us were ready for harvest rows of vegetables that would feed hundreds of families, herbs that would supply dozens of restaurants, and cover crops that would nourish the soil through winter. "I got a letter from Trevor," Hannah said quietly. Jackson and I both looked at her with surprise. "What did he say?" "He's serving his sentence at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Work release program, financial restitution requirements, mandatory counseling." She pulled the letter from her pocket. "He says he's been thinking about our conversation in jail, about forgiveness and moving forward. How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I feel sorry for him. He's so afraid of failure that he destroyed everything good in his life trying to avoid it." Hannah folded the letter back up. I wrote him back, told him about the farm, about what I've learned about real success. I don't know if he'll understand it, but maybe someday he will. As darkness fell, lights began to twinkle across our property solar lamps along pathways, warm glows from the farmhouse and guest cottage, stars emerging overhead. The sight filled me with deep completion, not because our story was over, but because we'd found our true direction. "Do you remember," Hannah said, "when we were kids and Mom made us help in her vegetable garden? You hated it," I recalled. "Said it was boring and dirty." I was wrong about a lot of things back then. She smiled. "I thought success meant escaping from this kind of life. Turns out it meant learning to value it." Jackson reached for both our hands. "To family," he said, raising an imaginary glass. "To community," I added. "To finding where you belong," Hannah finished. The next morning, I woke before dawn as I had for years, but for the first time in months. I wasn't thinking about schedules or projections. Instead, I reflected on the transformation our family had undergone, how crisis had revealed strength, how loss had led to discovery, how competition had been replaced by collaboration. Hannah was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, coffee brewing and the day's tasks organized on the counter. Through the window, I could see Jackson checking greenhouse thermostats and our employees beginning their morning routines. "Ready for another day?" Hannah asked, handing me coffee. "Ready for another year," I replied. We walked outside together to begin the work we'd chosen, the work that fed us as much as it fed others. The sun was rising over fields that had taught us patience, resilience, and the deep satisfaction that comes from nurturing something larger than ourselves. Behind us, the farmhouse stood solid and welcoming, its windows reflecting golden dawn light. Ahead of us, the day's work waited real work, meaningful work, work that would continue the transformation we'd begun not just of the land, but of ourselves. As we reached the first row of vegetables, Hannah turned to me with an expression of wonder I'd never seen during all her years of supposed success. "You know what the best part is," she said. "What, tomorrow we'll get to do it all again." And with that simple recognition of the gift that comes from meaningful work, we began another day of building something that would last not just for ourselves, but for everyone whose life we touched through the food we grew, the land we healed, and the community we nurtured one season at a time,